Year 3052 of the New Era, you have entered the Hades sector of the Federation, approaching Central Command. Assistant Vance, you're 0.0023 seconds late. Try to be more punctual next time. Alara Vance responded firmly. Yes, sir. Commander Kian continued. What's on the schedule today? Alara replied, her tone serious. At 9:30, you have a strategy meeting at Central Command. At 14 Fash, you'll return to Federation headquarters to meet with the President. And at 19 Fash, you'll accompany the President to the Interplanetary Gala. Kian turned to her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. A gala? Yes, sir, Alara confirmed immediately. I've already selected your attire for tonight. I've also arranged for an emergency alert to be sent to you at 19:30, requesting your immediate return to Central Command. Kian kept his expression neutral. Well done. With a practiced motion, Alara pulled out a chair for him. It's 9 now, you have 15 minutes to eat. As Kian ate, he noticed a rookie approaching with a bowl of tomatoes. His eyes narrowed, cold and piercing, staring daggers at the rookie. The rookie froze, utterly terrified. Oh God, that look is terrifying. What did I do wrong? Alara swiftly removed the bowl of tomatoes. Didn't you pay attention during orientation? Remember this. The commander doesn't eat tomatoes. Go. Now. Yes, ma'am, the rookie stammered, thinking to herself, thank God for Assistant Vance. The rookie bolted from the room. Just then, alarms blared throughout the command center. Alert! Alert! Abyssal fleet attacking! Alert! Alert! Abyssal fleet attacking! Kian threw on his coat without hesitation. Push today's schedule back by 2 hours. Notify the fleet. We deploy in 2 minutes. Yes, sir, Alara responded. Warship EC-0120 has been alerted and is standing by. Deploy! Sometime later, Alara was at the medical bay tending to the wounded when Lieutenant Hayes rushed in, his face full of worry. Dr. Vance, we have an emergency. Please, come with me. Seeing the urgency in his eyes, Alara didn't ask questions. She handed off her duties to a colleague, then followed him to another ship. What's going on? Did the battle go badly? The lieutenant shook his head. No, we secured a decisive victory. But the commander, he was injured saving my life. He's been unconscious since. I know his condition is unique. I didn't dare let anyone else near him, so I brought him to you. We're here. You should go in. I'll report our victory to Federation headquarters. Alara replied softly. Okay. And she stepped inside. Lieutenant Hayes wasn't being overly cautious. My boss isn't like other people. He's not just the strongest commander in the Federation, but also a succubus hybrid, forcibly cultivated in an incubator. The main reason I became Kian's sole medical officer and special assistant is because I was chosen by the research facility as a child to grow up alongside him. But after Kian was freed from the cultivation program, the president ordered his memories erased before sending him to the military academy. I never thought I'd see him again, but 2 years ago, the Federation sought me out to be his doctor. It made sense, I suppose. I know him better than anyone. After running a series of diagnostic tests, Alara prepared a specialized syringe. The moment the needle pierced his skin, the unconscious man's eyes snapped open. His pupils were deep and dangerous, like a predator locking onto prey, and they were fixed on her. Commander Kian, she said, trying to rouse him. In a split-second decision, she reached for the critical nerve cluster at the base of his neck, but his hand shot out, sharp claws clamping precisely onto the artery in her wrist. In the next moment, he pulled her into his arms, his other hand gripping her throat while staring into her eyes. Then she saw it, a faint glow emanating from the base of his horns. It was the sign of a succubus's volatile phase. Unfortunately, I walked right into his first heat. With her wrist pinned, she was helpless. She tried to speak. Commander, I'm Alara. Hearing her name, the pressure on her wrist eased slightly. He looked at her, his lips forming words. Lara? Cold sweat beaded on her forehead. That's right, it's me. I'm Alara. The next moment, a dangerous-looking succubus tail appeared from behind him. It was beautiful, with a small inverted triangle at the tip and a soft tuft of fur at the end. It swayed back and forth in front of her before coiling around her leg. He looked at her, his eyes glistening as he began to confess how much he'd missed her. Alara, I missed you so much. Don't ever leave me again, Alara. I want you by my side forever. Then he switched to full-on cuddle mode, nuzzling into her neck, rubbing against her like an affectionate pet. Alara was stunned. What is happening right now? I never imagined the handsome boy I grew up with could turn into this. Why aren't you looking at me? He whined, clinging to her like an insecure puppy. She had to summon all her willpower to separate the cold, composed Commander Kian from the emotionally volatile figure before her now. The word commander was on the tip of her tongue, but she risked a softer approach. Kian, she said gently, trying to calm him. I know. Can you let me go now, please? She tried to ease him off, but his tail only tightened around her arm. He looked at her with pleading eyes, his affection shifting into a stubborn demand. No, I'm not letting go. Then he kissed her hand. After years of studying succubus hybrids at the facility, Alara knew this was just one of their tricks to enchant humans. She tried to pry the tail off, but it was no use. If anything, it coiled even tighter around her wrist. Look at this! The ice-cold commander has turned into a clingy puppy who just wants to cuddle and kiss. How do you resist something like this? Defeated, Alara looked down at her trapped wrist, took a slow, deep breath, and tried to reason with him as calmly as possible. Come on now. I can't treat your injuries like this. Kian, can you stand up? But if I don't hold you, it hurts so much, he sobbed. His eyes red and thick lashes clumped with tears. He looked like he was about to throw himself into her arms recklessly. I feel awful. Can you kiss me? Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. Alara froze. I'm done for. I'm so dead. Somebody save me. As her mind started to spin, she heard him whisper against her lips. Ellie, kiss me. Hearing the name Ellie, she went completely still. Did I hear that right? Kian's memories were supposed to be wiped clean by the Federation. Why is he calling me by my childhood nickname now? A small sound snapped her back to reality. In the few seconds she'd been lost in thought, Kian had started crying in earnest. Ellie, you're not paying attention to me today. Don't you like me anymore? No, that's not it. Faced with this version of her boss, Alara was utterly bewildered. She had no idea what to do. Tears suddenly streamed down his face. The bizarre sight jolted her out of her stunned state. After a moment, she reached out to wipe his cheeks, soothing him. Kian, come on now, don't cry. I want a hug, he sobbed. To calm his spiraling emotions, she had no choice but to give in, wrapping her arms around him and patting his back gently. All right, I'm hugging you. No more crying. He could barely control his emotions. Okay, I'll be good. I won't cry anymore. He lowered his head, inching closer. Ellie, if you won't kiss me, I'll kiss you. Alara softly replied, okay. And Kian began kissing her, his sobs gradually subsiding. The kiss went on, until Alara felt breathless. She tried to push him away, but he was too strong, so she had no choice but to let it happen. When she came to her senses, his tail had slipped under her shirt. She slowly opened her eyes and found herself still trapped in his overwhelming embrace, struggling to breathe. Just this once, she thought. Just for tonight, I'll let this happen. Suddenly, she grabbed his collar and pulled him into a deep, passionate kiss, trailing from his jaw down to his neck. It's heavy. I can't breathe. Alara slowly opened her eyes and saw Kian still holding her tightly. A faint blush spread across her cheeks. He was squeezing her so hard she could barely catch her breath. What was both amusing and frustrating was that even in his deep sleep, his mouth remained slightly parted, as if still teasing her. He suddenly grabbed her hand and brought it to his lips for a kiss. She had never imagined that the oral fixation phase, a symptom she'd only read about, could manifest in the normally stoic Commander Kian. The oral fixation phase, as the name suggests, is when cognitive and expressive functions focus on the mouth. Those affected find comfort in chewing or kissing, developing a strong dependence on a person or object. If separated, they become anxious and show distress by crying. Under normal circumstances, Kian would wake up soon. Either way, I should get up first to avoid any future awkwardness. Alara gently pried Kian's hand from her waist, then carefully lifted his head to slide out from under him. But as she cautiously pulled her hand away, Kian's nose twitched, and a low whining sound started in his throat, the unmistakable sign of tears about to spill. Panic surged through her. What do I do? Is he going to cry again? I have to keep him quiet right now. Before he could make a sound, Alara leaned down and gently, carefully pressed her lips to his. The sharp, handsome lines of his face softened, his brows relaxing as he calmed. As his breathing steadied, she pulled back. She paused for a second before standing up, gathering her clothes from the floor and stepping outside. It's fine. It was just one time. It's fine. It's fine. She muttered to herself. Her fingers brushed a mark on her neck, and she quickly pulled her collar up, fastening the top button before leaving the room, fully dressed. The moment she stepped outside, she came face to face with Kian's father. Duke Arden, she said politely. The Duke's face was stern. How is my son? Alara felt a bead of sweat trickle down her back. I've treated the commander's injuries, sir. He's stable now. However, an infection caused a fever, which triggered his first volatile phase. And you were with him all night? The Duke pressed. A sharp look crossed the Duke's face. Assistant Vance, I want you to keep quiet about helping him through his volatile phase. Duke Arden, Lieutenant Hayes, and others know I was the only one in the commander's room last night. I don't see how it can be concealed. Don't worry about that, the Duke cut in, his brows furrowing. I'll handle it. I just spoke with Professor Sterling. A succubus hybrid forgets everything that happens during a volatile phase after recovery. I assume you know this, Assistant? Alara bowed her head. I understand. Good. You're dismissed. With that, the Duke turned and walked away. Just pretend nothing happened, she told herself. It's better for everyone. The next morning, Kian woke up in his quarters. Sitting up, he noticed his body had returned to its human form. He frowned, a trace of dissatisfaction crossing his handsome face. Though he couldn't remember last night, he knew his body's instincts. He knew his volatile phase had been triggered, and someone had been with him. Without help, he'd have been tormented by symptoms and wouldn't have recovered this quickly. Kian called Lieutenant Hayes. Hayes, who was in my room last night? I don't know, sir. I was busy handling post-battle reports last night. You might want to ask someone else. Unsatisfied with the response, Kian got out of bed and walked into the living room. He poured himself a glass of water. Just as he was drinking, the front door opened. Alara arrived right on time to prepare his breakfast, only to find him already standing there. His long legs and the sharp lines of his throat moved as he drank. Her eyes traced the strong column of his neck down to his toned frame. The moment his gaze met hers, she quickly looked away. Don't think about yesterday. Nothing happened yesterday. Commander, are you feeling better? She asked, her voice steady as she inquired about his injuries. Just a scratch, he replied coolly. A few minutes later, Alara was helping him get dressed. You'll still need regular bandage changes. After breakfast, I'll redress your wounds. Before she could finish, Kian's hand shot out, grabbing hers as she was tying his tie. The lips that had kissed her last night parted. Assistant Vance, he said. Find the woman who was with me last night. Alara froze. I have to find myself? She stared at him for a long moment, making sure she hadn't misheard. When she didn't respond, Kian pressed. Is there a problem, Assistant? No, sir, she stammered. Then do it. He tossed the words at her, then tilted his chin toward the half-tied tie, clearly expecting her to finish her task. With a storm of emotions swirling inside, she finished tying his tie, thinking to herself, It was me, you idiot! How am I supposed to investigate that? And does he really think I'm some kind of miracle worker? Why does he keep dumping every little thing on me? Ugh, he should just drop dead. A few days later, things were back to normal. Alara was piloting the shuttle while Kian lounged lazily in the co-pilot's seat, listening to a news broadcast. He absently brought his hand to his mouth, but when his assistant didn't react, he had to suppress a wave of irritation. Alara noticed his mood shift and gave him a discreet glance. Why's he suddenly so grumpy? Better not poke the bear right now. The next moment, she saw him searching for something. When he didn't find it, he turned to her. Don't you have any candy today? Of course, she thought. Some habits never change. He's loved those hard peach candies since we were kids. But after that night, she'd realized something new. His love for candy wasn't just a sweet tooth. Maybe it was a way to manage his adult oral fixation. He needed sugar to keep the symptoms in check. I've got some in my jacket pocket, she replied quickly. Sorry, my hands are full right now. I'll switch to autopilot. Suddenly, Kian leaned close to her. Alara flinched. What's he doing? Before she could react, his hand was in her pocket. A faint blush crept across her cheeks. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but after what happened between them, she couldn't stay as calm as before. When Kian pulled the candy from her pocket, he seemed to notice something too. His hand paused, and he looked up, his gaze lingering on her reddening ears. A rare, fleeting smile crossed his lips, as if he found it amusing to finally see a crack in his assistant's work machine facade. Assistant Vance, what's got you so nervous? Before, Alara wouldn't have thought twice. But now, after being so close to the man in front of her, she couldn't respond to his proximity with her usual cool-headedness. She felt his gaze lingering on her face. Her fingers, resting on the control panel, curled slightly. Nothing, she said, her voice tight. She turned her head away, trying her hardest to push the fiery memories of that night out of her mind. Thankfully, once Kian had retrieved the candy, he pulled his hand back and settled into his seat. Alara stole a glance at him. It seemed like he'd just asked casually. He didn't really care. He unwrapped the candy and popped it into his mouth before leaning back, closing his eyes and slipping back into his usual cold, distant demeanor. Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. After the day's work was done, Alara checked her schedule. With the military campaign over, her long-planned vacation was finally here. She briefed Lieutenant Hayes on the commander's daily routines and schedule, ensuring everything would run smoothly in her absence. With everything squared away, she hopped into her personal shuttle and headed home to Ethel for some much-needed rest. But there was one key detail she'd overlooked. She forgot to tell Kian she was leaving. As soon as she stepped through the door, she called out, "Dad, Mom, I'm home!" Her mom rushed out to greet her. "Alara, sweetheart. I heard you were coming back, so I spruced up your room. Go check it out and see if you like it." "I love it," Alara said with a smile. Her dad chimed in, "Sweetie, go wash your hands for dinner. I didn't let the robots touch a thing. I made all your favorite dishes myself." As they talked, Grandpa Vance sat down at the table, shooting his son-in-law a disapproving look. "You're always wasting time on trivial nonsense. No sense of propriety. Dad, can you stop with the snide remarks? If you can't stand being around us, you're welcome to move out," her mom shot back. Her dad, clearly used to this, just grinned. "I'm just excited because our little girl's home." Grandpa Vance opened his mouth to say more, but seeing both his daughter and granddaughter staring at him, he grumbled, "Fine, let's eat." Dinner started off cheerfully, but halfway through, her grandfather suddenly brought up something. "You remember that young Marquis from the Pooh family, Caden, don't you?" Alara had skimmed his profile in the First Star's Noble database and had a vague recollection. "I remember, but why, Grandpa?" Her grandfather paused briefly before saying, "Since you're on leave, you should make time to have dinner with him tomorrow. I'll handle the arrangements." The sudden announcement caught Alara off guard. "Are you setting me up on a blind date?" Noticing her discomfort, her grandfather rephrased, "Just meet with him. If you hit it off, all the better." Her mom frowned, then after a moment's hesitation said, "Ellie, don't force yourself. If you and this Marcus Caden don't click, just let it be." "I know," Alara said, her voice tense. "With all the skirmishes at the galaxy's edge, I'm always on call. I really don't have the energy to date anyone right now. Besides, not long ago, my boss and we accidentally got involved." When Kian came downstairs after his nap, he still looked a bit groggy, but his military discipline kept his tall, commanding posture intact. Each step down the stairs showcased his powerful build. He heard noises from the kitchen and assumed Alara was preparing lunch, but when he walked in, he saw a service robot setting the meal on the table. "Where's Assistant Vance?" he asked, his voice icy as he stared at the food. The robot's voice function activated, playing a pre-recorded message from Alara. "Hello, Commander. Assistant Alara Vance is currently on leave for 3 days." Hearing this, Kian's lips pressed into a thin, hard line. His expression grew even colder. "So, I'm without an assistant for the next 3 days?" The next day, Alara followed the location data her grandfather's staff sent to an upscale restaurant. There, she met Marquis Caden, a polite and refined young man. Over dinner, she learned he was also there due to family pressure, which put her at ease. They were chatting pleasantly when the restaurant manager hurried to their table. "Ms. Vance," he said urgently, "could you check your communicator?" Confused, Alara activated the wrist communicator. The screen lit up with a staggering number, 39 missed calls, all from Commander Kian. Panic surged through her. She assumed something serious must have happened at headquarters. Just as she was about to call back, the communicator buzzed again. She shot Caden an apologetic look and answered. Bracing for a reprimand, she was instead met with a cold question. "Where did you put the watch I brought back from the 4th star trip?" Alara blinked. All this, all those calls, just for a watch? She kept her voice as calm as possible. "It's in your bedroom, 2nd drawer of the nightstand." The line disconnected. She didn't bother dwelling on it. Putting away her communicator, she looked up and saw Caden watching her. "Sorry about that," she said. "No problem," he replied. "We were talking about—" Her communicator buzzed again. She answered immediately, her patience starting to wear thin. "Commander, is there something else? Are you losing patience with me?" Kian's voice was ice cold. "No, sir," she said carefully. "I was just saying there are plenty of other watches in your cabinet if you—" He cut her off bluntly. "Assistant, I'm looking for the watch from the 4th star." Alara rubbed her temple. "All right. I'll send detailed instructions to Lieutenant Hayes about where to find it. Is that okay?" "Who gave you permission to let someone else into my home?" His voice suddenly turned sharp, laced with possessiveness. Alara's simmering frustration was momentarily replaced by a strange feeling in her chest, like the flick of a succubus's tail. Then she reassured herself. "Alara, it's just the territorial instincts of a succubus hybrid. He's only protecting his space. Don't overthink it." After a brief pause, she explained, "The thing is, Commander, I'm in Ethel right now. I can't come back immediately." Kian's response was calm but sent a chill through her. "I'm in Ethel. I'll come get you." The line disconnected, leaving Alara stunned. At that moment, a deafening roar echoed through the air, the familiar sound of one of his warships. The small warship descended steadily toward the restaurant. The dramatic arrival looked like a major planetary event. Moments later, a man in a military uniform stepped out of the hatch and strode toward her. She took a deep breath, silently cursing him. Is he out of his mind? The next thing she knew, Kian was standing in front of her. His gaze landed on the man sitting across from her, and an inexplicable anger flared in his eyes. He frowned, his stare locked onto Caden. Let's go, Kian said to Alara. Commander, I'm in the middle of... she whispered. Caden suddenly spoke up. Sir, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Vance is on leave, isn't she? Kian's expression darkened. He shot Caden a piercing glare. It seems you're unfamiliar with the nature of our work. This is an emergency. Her leave is cancelled. Caden was too stunned by his commanding presence to respond. Suddenly, Kian grabbed Alara's hand. She froze. Is he seriously holding my hand? Let's go, Kian repeated, his voice thick with irritation, and he led her out of the restaurant, his grip firm on her hand. The warship was astonishingly fast, reaching his estate in just minutes. Standing at the door to his bedroom, Alara said patiently, I'll go get the watch for you, sir. Kian, still in a foul mood, only grunted in response. Alara went straight to where she remembered leaving the watch. She opened the nightstand drawer, pushed aside a few documents, and there it was, safely tucked in its box. It's right here, she said coolly, in the exact drawer I told you about. Kian took the watch with an air of indifference. I looked, didn't see it. Guess you hid it too well. Alara's eye twitched. Jerk! He didn't even bother looking properly. And now it's my fault? But he was her boss, so she swallowed her anger. I'll be more careful in the future. Any other arrangements, Commander? Kian opened his schedule. The President wants to establish a way station on Cygnus Prime. I've been assigned to the mission. He paused, his gaze lazily sweeping over her for a few seconds before deciding for her. Assistant, you're coming with me. That was the last straw. I'm still on leave, she protested. Kian seemed to actually consider this for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, his communicator buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID and answered with a scowl. The spaceport just detected one of your fleet's warships entering Ethel airspace. Is that correct? Correct, Kian replied nonchalantly. I need a valid reason, Duke Arden shouted through the communicator. You had the entire military command lie to me about my volatile phase. Personally, I'm very curious about the woman who was with me that night, the one you went to such lengths to hide from me. Change the subject, the Duke snapped. That's an insignificant detail, and you don't need to be distracted by it. Oh, Kian said dryly. The Duke could tell he wasn't listening. I can't talk to you, you stubborn fool. Is Assistant Vance there? Put her on. Hearing this, Kian lazily glanced at Alara. He glared at her, annoyed but silent. He's the one causing trouble, and he has the nerve to glare at me? She felt like she was about to explode, but then Kian tilted his head slightly, his eyes carrying a questioning look. Alara's breath caught. Damn it. Now every time he tilts his head like that, she couldn't help but think of that night, how he looked with those little horns, nuzzling her neck like an adorable puppy. But then reality snapped her back. That was just an illusion. The infuriating man in front of her was the real Kian. While she was lost in thought, Kian ended the call, clearly fed up with his father's lecture. Just as Alara sighed in relief, her communicator buzzed. She glanced at the screen and said coolly to him, It's the Duke. Give it here. I'll hang up for you, Kian offered, holding out his hand like he was doing her a favor. She shot him another look and reluctantly answered the call. Assistant Vance, I chose you to stay by Kian's side because of your exceptional competence. I expect you to take your duties seriously. How could you let this happen? I'll do my best, Alara said through gritted teeth. Not your best. You must ensure he behaves properly. What are you thinking? She wanted to scream. How am I supposed to know what that jerk will do? This better not happen again, the Duke said, then hung up before she could respond. Alara frowned, then looked up to see Kian watching her with an amused expression, faint smile on his lips. Commander, do you find this funny? He politely wiped the smile off his face. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, Assistant. I'm not feeling a lot of sincerity there, Commander. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, his expression showing genuine curiosity. Oh, what would make it more sincere? A raise for starters, she said without hesitation. Kian raised an eyebrow. Thinking he was about to refuse, Alara took a step forward, looking down at him. Getting called back to work during my vacation. Asking for a raise isn't too much, is it? Assistant, he replied nonchalantly. Before you went on leave, you're sure you completed all your assigned tasks? Of course I'm sure, she shot back, indignant that he'd question her work ethic. Do you think I'd leave without finishing everything? Oh? Then tell me, Assistant, have you found the woman who was with me that night? Alara looked away, suddenly speechless. Weren't we talking about a raise? Why is he circling back to this? Kian observed her reaction, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. It seems my assistant hasn't quite finished her duties, he drawled. So what? I'll give you a chance to make up for it. Come with me to Cygnus Prime, and when we return, we can seriously discuss that raise. Alara stood firm, not answering right away. Don't worry, he added. I'll make it worth your effort. Ellie, sweetheart, why are you already heading back to the military? I thought you had 3 days off. Before boarding the shuttle, Alara called her mom to let her know she had to return to work. She couldn't exactly say, well, the thing is, he's paying me an obscene amount of money. So she just said, Mom, an emergency came up. I'll find time to visit soon. All right, but next time you have to stay longer. I'll try. Alara spent a few more minutes reassuring her mom before finally saying goodbye. Mom, you and Dad take care. I'll see you both next time. Love you. She hung up. When she turned around, she jumped. Kian was standing right behind her. He looked at her for a moment, his voice even. You're quite the charmer, assistant. Alara was completely thrown off, but before she could say anything, he flashed a sly smirk and stepped onto the shuttle. She had no choice but to follow him. Once inside, Alara suddenly asked, How did you know which restaurant I was at today? I had the AI track you, he replied without a hint of concern. The answer was exactly what she expected, but it still made her face stiffen. Commander, from now on, you're not allowed to abuse your authority to monitor my personal activities. Kian seemed to pick up on the unusual seriousness in her voice. After a moment of silence, he offered a compromise. If you promise to answer my calls from now on, I'll agree. Yes, sir, she replied without hesitation. Upon arriving at Cygnus Prime, Alara conducted a sweep of the surrounding area. Succubus hybrids need to regularly consume ether fruit to replenish their internal energy crystals, and fortunately, the soil here was suitable for cultivation. The environment has been confirmed safe. The quarters are habitable. It's currently 21 MW. The bathroom's heating system is activated. The bath will be ready in 10 seconds, allowing the commander to maintain his bathing schedule. After her report, she quickly checked his bedroom, then went to personally prepare his bathwater. When the water reached the right temperature, she was about to head downstairs to inform Kian, but he walked in on his own. Alara was leaning over the tub, the fitted lines of her uniform accentuating her slender figure. Kian's gaze lingered on her for a moment. He cleared his throat. Assistant, stand up. She stood, looking at him with curiosity, but he just ushered her out of the bathroom. All right, you can go now. Good night. He promptly slammed the door in her face. Alara stared at the closed door, utterly confused. What's his deal now? Talk about mood swings. She was exhausted after the long day. After a quick shower, she collapsed onto her bed and fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, she vaguely heard a soft knock at her door. At first, she thought it was a dream, but when she opened her eyes, she realized someone was actually there. Grumbling, she dragged herself out of bed, her face full of sleepy irritation. She flung the door open and saw a disheveled man standing there, clutching a pillow so tightly his knuckles were white. His lips parted, and he said ever so casually, Assistant Vance, there's an insect in my room. Alara stared at him for a second. He was so calm she almost thought he was scolding her for negligence. But then she remembered something from their time at the research facility. Kian was deathly afraid of insects. With that realization, she looked closer and saw that beneath his composed expression, his face was tense. He was genuinely scared. Alara's irritation melted away instantly. She patiently followed him to his room. Where's the insect? Kian refused to step inside. He stood at the threshold, coolly directing her, 10 centimeters to the right of the headboard. A minute later, Alara emerged, the insect dealt with. All right, it's dead. I'm going back to sleep. Suddenly, Kian grabbed her hand. She looked up at him, but he didn't say anything, just held her hand tightly. After a moment, she rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off some of her grogginess. Are you still scared, Commander? No, he denied immediately. Right. I'm the one who's scared, my bad, she said, too tired to argue. She led him back to his bedroom and pointed at the bed. Lie down. I'll keep watch. All right, he said, as if worried she'd change her mind. He quickly set his pillow on the bed and lay down. Under his watchful gaze, Alara had no choice but to pull up a chair and sit beside him. Seeing her keep her promise, Kian finally relaxed and slowly closed his eyes. Alara planned to wait until he was asleep and then sneak back to her room, but she must have been more exhausted than she thought because she ended up dozing off. A while later, her head slumped forward. Kian instantly caught it with his hand, his eyes fixed on her sleeping face. After a while, his arm started to go numb. He gently lifted her onto the bed, then sat on the floor beside her, watching over her while absent-mindedly stroking her hand. The next morning, when Alara woke up, the man was gone. All that remained was a message on her communicator. I'm heading to the development zone. No need to follow. Go to the local medical relief team and organize their data. Pick me up this afternoon when I'm done. Alara raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. Normally, Kian insisted she accompany him on every mission. Why was this time different? And how did I end up in his bed? Did I sleepwalk and kick him out? Is he mad, she wondered? Whatever, I'm not going to question a rare chance to relax. The quiet morning passed quickly. Alara thought the day would be uneventful, but then she ran into someone unexpected. It was Leo, her senior from medical school. The director mentioned someone from the first star was visiting. I can't believe it's you, Alara. Here, this file might be useful for you. Thanks, Leo. This is the last piece I needed, she said, taking the stack of documents. Now the medical inventory list is finally complete. Since they'd run into each other, Leo invited her downstairs for coffee. Alara had some new ideas about medical technology she wanted to discuss with him, and since she had time, she happily agreed. When they finished talking, she checked the time. It was time for Kian to wrap up work. Leo, I've got to go pick up my boss, she said, heading to her vehicle. I'll let you know when the supply request from the first star gets approved. Sounds good. He nodded. The roads here are rough, so be careful. The development zone was in a rugged, mountainous area. Thanks to her expert driving skills, Alara arrived without a hitch. The team had just finished the day's work, so she stayed in the vehicle and waited for her boss, not wanting to interrupt. From a distance, she spotted the most commanding figure at the site. Kian had changed into a black work uniform and was busy measuring something with a survey tool, barking orders at the team. The plain uniform, which looked ordinary on others, seemed to radiate a quiet, powerful energy on his striking frame. Right then, Kian noticed her. He handed the tool to a subordinate and walked over. When did you get here? He asked, his eyes scanning her. Just now, Alara replied coolly. Are you done for the day, Commander? He grunted in confirmation, his gaze lingering on her with a certain weight. Got any candy? Right here, she said, quickly pulling a lollipop from her pocket. She was about to hand it to him when she noticed his hands were covered in dirt. Hesitating, she asked softly, Should I unwrap it for you? He just looked at her for a moment, then stuffed his dirty hands into his pockets and said quietly, Yeah. Why do you smell like coffee? And why do you smell like you've been around another man? Alara carefully unwrapped the lollipop and held it out. As Kian leaned down to take it with his mouth, his lips brushed against her fingertips. She yanked her hand back instantly, only to see him staring at her, the lollipop stick clenched between his teeth. His gaze locked onto the spot where his lips had just brushed her skin. Being stared at like that sent an odd sensation through her chest, reminding her of how her big puppy had looked at her that night. She opened her mouth, about to say something to break the tension, but Kian suddenly stepped closer, pinning her between his body and the open car door. Without warning, he leaned down, his sharp nose sniffing the air by her cheek. He pulled the lollipop from his mouth. Assistant, where were you today? Alara's body stiffened. As he spoke, she could smell the sweet, enticing peach scent on his breath. Snapping out of her daze, she pushed him back and cleared her throat. I was at the hospital. He looked at her, his face expressionless. Then why do you smell like coffee? And why do you smell like you've been around another man? A wave of panic hit her. My fault. I forgot how abnormally sharp a succubus hybrid sense of smell is. I ran into a senior from med school at the hospital, she explained. We grabbed coffee and talked for a bit after I finished my work. He accidentally spilled some on me and helped wipe it off, that's all. I didn't think I needed to report that to you. Humph, was all he said. He opened the back door himself and slid into the back seat. Alara frowned. Is he mad? Why? Right. He's out there working hard while I, his assistant, was off having coffee with someone else. Maybe that didn't sit right. Plus, succubi are possessive. My showing up with another man's scent probably offended his instincts. I'll have to be more careful about that during work hours. With that in mind, she buckled her seatbelt and glanced in the rearview mirror. The man in the back seat was pouting, sucking on the lollipop, radiating a gloomy aura. It should have been an intimidating sight. But as Alara started the car, a small smile tugged at her lips. The thought of the great commander sitting in the back, sulking over a lollipop, was actually kind of adorable. Back at the estate, Alara spent nearly 2 hours wrapping up her work. It was late when she left the office. She glanced upstairs, assuming Kian was asleep, and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She looked up at the starry sky, taking a slow drag, letting the smoke soothe her frayed nerves. What she didn't know was that someone was watching her every move. After a few minutes, he saw she was still smoking. The way her long, slender fingers held the cigarette as she lazily exhaled puffs of smoke made him frown. He abruptly drew the curtain shut and headed downstairs. And a moment later, Alara heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, startled to see Kian, who she thought was asleep, walking toward her. She instinctively hid the cigarette behind her back. His eyes flicked to her hands. I don't remember you being a smoker, assistant. Since she'd been caught red-handed, she dropped the pretense. I just never smoked in front of you, she said bluntly. He looked down at her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. You don't like the smell of smoke, do you, Commander? She sighed. She was sure everyone on his team knew full well that Commander Kian hated the smell of cigarette smoke. After a long pause, he finally looked away. I don't hate it that much, he muttered. Alara was so stunned she didn't know how to respond. He cleared his throat. Tomorrow you'll come with me to the development zone. And with that, he quickly retreated. Alara stood there, frozen, thinking to herself, why did he say that? The next day, Kian and Alara headed to the development zone together. After hands-on work the previous day, today Kian's only task was monitoring data from the top of the control tower. Meanwhile, Alara's role was reduced to fetching tea and water for him. She tried several times to ask permission to help downstairs, or at least let someone else handle the drinks. But Kian refused. Each time she brought it up, he just asked, what if I get thirsty later? She glared at him, thinking, then you can just die of thirst. Suddenly, one of the project leads approached. Commander, the way station construction is progressing smoothly. At this rate, Cygnus Prime will soon have its first interplanetary connection. Excellent, Kian nodded. Commander, since we're finishing early today, would you like to join us for a celebratory dinner tonight? Hearing the enthusiastic invitation, Alara was about to decline on his behalf, knowing her boss hated crowds, but Kian surprised her. Sure. What's with him today, she wondered. That evening they arrived at the restaurant. The dinner went as expected, with everyone constantly trying to toast the commander. At first, Alara didn't intervene, but as more people approached and Kian showed no signs of refusing, she had to step in and start taking the drinks for him. The commander can't have any more. Thanks for understanding. It was late when the dinner finally ended. As they reached the parking lot, Alara saw Kian climb into the passenger seat on his own and sighed in relief, thinking he wasn't drunk after all. Half an hour later, they pulled up in front of the estate. Alara told Kian to get out of the car, but he just sat there, motionless. When he heard his name, he seemed to snap out of his daze, turning to look at her with deep, intense eyes. Thinking he just didn't want to move, she leaned over to open the car door for him. But as her hand reached across, she froze. Kian was sitting upright, his expression calm. But the moment she leaned close, a tail appeared behind him, its tip lightly brushing the back of her hand. Is he in succubus mode again? She instinctively tried to pull her hand back, but the sudden movement threw her off balance. Kian's hand shot out to steady her, and he used the momentum to pull her into his lap. Her first instinct was to look down. The tail was now possessively resting on her hip. A flush of heat spread across her face. Let go, she hissed, looking up at him. His face was flushed, his breath heavy with the smell of alcohol, but his voice was surprisingly steady. Just for a minute. She tried to push him off. Let me go first. She caught herself. I mean, let go of your tail. He didn't move the tail. She gave him a stern look. Commander, if you don't stop, I'll report you to the Federation for workplace harassment. That seemed to sober him up a bit. He looked at her silently for a moment. Then the tail loosened its grip. Alara let out a relieved breath. Good. He's still capable of listening to reason. She quickly climbed out of his lap and stepped out of the car. Sobering meds? I need sobering meds. He's definitely drunk to be acting like this. As she started walking toward the house, Kian called after her. Assistant, where are you going? She didn't look back, not wanting to see him waving that tail around. Getting you some sobering meds. Right then, he caught up to her and grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. He looked down at her and explained, I'm not drunk. According to my internal diagnostics, my brain is just producing more dopamine than usual because you were too close to me in the car. He hiccuped. Alara quickly pulled her hand free. That was a loud hiccup. And he says he's not drunk? She turned away, frowning. I'm still getting you those sobering meds. She headed toward the house, with Kian quietly trailing behind. Alara opened the medical kit she'd brought from the first star. As soon as she found what she was looking for, Kian grabbed her hand and placed it on his chest. He stared at her intently. According to my internal diagnostics, he repeated seriously, it's because you were too close to me in the car. Your proximity triggered an above-average dopamine release in my brain. Alara was floored by his absurdly scientific-sounding nonsense. What the hell is he talking about? She handed him the vial of meds. Am I the doctor here, or are you? He gazed at her deeply for a few seconds before taking the vial and downing it in one gulp. Then he looked up. Assistant. Afraid he was about to say more nonsense, she cut him off. Commander, you can go to your room now. We have work tomorrow. What about me? He countered. You're the one who made my tail come out. You can't just leave me like this. Alara pressed a hand to her forehead, trying not to laugh. You'll calm down on your own, Commander. Are you saying I'm not calm? He challenged. She shot him a look, wanting to say, "Are you kidding me?" But instead she said, "I mean, you'll be fine once the alcohol wears off." He suddenly wrapped his arm around her waist, his eyes locked on hers. "You still don't believe I'm not drunk, do you, assistant?" She'd had enough. She pushed him away, walked to the next room, opened the door for him, and made a polite "after you" gesture. He just looked at her, raising an eyebrow. Finally, without another word, he strode into the room. The moment the door was closing, she felt something soft and fuzzy brush against her palm. Click. She slammed the door shut almost immediately. What was that? Why is my hand tingling like this? She stood outside his room for a moment, and when she heard no more sounds, she headed back to her own room. She showered, then chugged a bottle of ice-cold water to calm her racing thoughts. The next second, her communicator rang. Seeing it was Duke Arden, she lowered her voice and answered. "Assistant Vance, how are things on Cygnus Prime? Under the commander's leadership, the way station construction is progressing smoothly. No need to worry, Duke," she replied quietly. "Good. The main reason the president sent him there is to curb some of his temperament. Kian can be too erratic at times. When you return, I want you to convince him to visit the family estate." Alara highly doubted Kian would listen to a word from her. He was the boss. She was just the assistant. But since the Duke had requested it, she had no choice but to agree. "Understood, Duke." After hanging up, she collapsed onto the bed, finally ready to sleep. Another chaotic day. She'd just drifted off when she heard a gentle knock at the door again. She forced her eyes open and sat up. "I swear he's doing this on purpose. Why wait until I'm asleep to bother me?" She was ready to give her inconsiderate boss a piece of her mind, but the words died in her throat the moment she opened the door. He stood there, a pair of soft demon horns drooping amid his tousled hair, clutching his pillow tightly. But unlike the previous night, this time his eyes were red and puffy, and he was lightly scratching at the doorframe like a lost kitten. When he saw her, his big, watery eyes locked onto hers, and he whimpered, "Ellie, I missed you." Alara stared at him, stunned. It hadn't been that long since his last sensitive episode. Why was this one coming so soon? Before she could process it, the man at the threshold let out a small sob, and the triangular tip of his tail trembled. Then he burst into tears. "Ellie," he cried, "you didn't answer me right away." Alara sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Great, no sleep tonight." Alara couldn't stay firm. She tried to soothe him. "Come on, I'll take you back to your room, okay?" At the suggestion of being taken to his own room, the little horns on his head drooped. He sobbed, his voice choked with distress but resolute. "I don't want to sleep alone." Faced with those big, teary eyes, so pitiful they couldn't be ignored, Alara knew she had to handle this carefully. She understood that a succubus in this state needed soothing, or they could lose all reason and be overtaken by primal instincts. After just a few seconds of deliberation, she sighed and stepped aside, letting him into her room. She closed the door and turned to face him. The first thing he did was place his pillow on her bed, arranging it neatly right next to hers. Then he lay down on her side of the bed, pulled the blanket up, and looked at her with wide, expectant eyes, clearly waiting for her to join him. Alara frowned but stepped forward. Her plan was to get him to sleep, then report this unexpected incident to the Federation. The moment she sat on the edge of the bed, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close so they were face to face. The sudden possessive move startled her. She put her hands on his shoulders, her expression stern. "Aren't we supposed to sleep? What are you doing?" He hugged her, a bit hesitantly. "Ellie, I missed you. I want to sleep while holding you." "Kian," she said, taking a deep breath, "if you keep this up, I won't let you hold me at all." He let out a pitiful whimper at the threat, and his tail drooped reluctantly. Seeing him behave, Alara agreed to lie down with him, but didn't hold back her warning. "Just sleep. No funny business." He looked at her, his mouth opening and closing, but he didn't dare argue. The expression on his face was full of disappointment. Despite that, he buried his face in the crook of her neck, his possessiveness winning out as he mumbled, "Ellie, why aren't you hugging me back?" Hearing him repeat her nickname in that soft, vulnerable voice started to wear her down. She firmly pushed his head away. "Go to sleep." Just get him to sleep, she thought. Tomorrow he'll be back to normal, like last time. But the next morning, Alara overslept. If Kian really wakes up and sees me in his bed, how am I going to explain this? As her mind raced, the man above her suddenly cupped her face, his nose brushing against hers. "Ellie," he whispered, "can I kiss you?" Her eyes widened. She stared at the horn still peeking through his hair, and a sense of dread hit her. Oh no, this isn't like last time. Something's really wrong with him. "No, you can't," she said instinctively. But he'd already started nuzzling her, his face rubbing against her cheek and neck. It was a deliberate, methodical action, like a wild animal marking its territory, trying to cover her with his scent. Alara knew enough about succubus biology to understand what was happening. He was marking her. What embarrassed and shocked her was that, in his transformed state, Kian instinctively saw her as his territory. Suddenly, she shoved him off. "Kian!" she shouted. He looked down at her, confused. His eyes were red and wet, his usually pale face now abnormally flushed. He looked like he'd been on the verge of bliss, only to be abruptly stopped. Alara forced herself to stay calm. "Get off me, right now!" she said sternly. He bit his lower lip, a clear sign of his oral fixation, but her firm tone made him hold back. He complied. "Now go to your room, wash your face, and change," she ordered. She'd found his weakness, a commanding tone. He sat up, tilting his head. "What about you, Ellie?" She resisted the urge to reach out and fix a stray lock of his messy hair. "I'm going to make breakfast," she said seriously, "and call Professor Sterling at the First Star Research Facility." He seemed to consider this, then reluctantly nodded. While waiting in the kitchen, Alara called Professor Sterling. When she described what had happened, he sounded surprised. To clarify, he had to ask bluntly, "Did Commander Kian become intimate with you this time?" "No," Alara said, maintaining her composure. "Alara, I need you to describe last night's events in detail," he pressed. She was about to speak when a pair of arms wrapped around her from behind. A weight pressed against her back, and a grumpy voice mumbled, "Ellie, who are you talking to?" Professor Sterling paused. He seemed to realize she couldn't talk freely. "Alara, we'll continue this conversation when you're free," he said before hanging up. Alara turned her head and found Kian's face rubbing against hers. After a few nuzzles, her irritation melted away. "I'm making breakfast," she sighed. "I heard you talking to someone," the big, clingy puppy behind her whined. "I was just consulting Professor Sterling about a work issue." As she spoke, he nibbled lightly on her shoulder, interrupting her. She pointed to the door. "Out!" His big eyes welled up as he looked at her, full of confusion. "How can I not be near you, Ellie?" "How can you not?" she shot back coolly. His eyes instantly filled with tears. He started sobbing. "I'll die of misery." "No, you won't," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I will," he cried, practically on the verge of a full meltdown. Seeing he was about to cry again, she softened her tone. "If you keep talking nonsense, you're not getting breakfast." He looked at her with pitiful, teary eyes and sniffled. She couldn't stay mad at him. "Fine, we'll go together," she conceded. "Right," he cheered, instantly perking up. He followed her to the dining room like an eager puppy and sat down. Normally, Alara used breakfast time to brief him on the day's schedule. But today, when she turned to speak, she saw him quietly sipping a glass of milk, his tail gently wagging in satisfaction after every few sips. He finished his glass of milk and let out a soft burp, the faint scent of milk lingering. Seeing her boss like this only gave Alara a bigger headache. How are we supposed to keep working on the development project with him acting like this? Kian noticed her gloomy expression. He blinked, then leaned in close, his breath still sweet with the scent of milk. "Ellie, are you upset?" His eyes darted back and forth for a few seconds. Then, without a word, he jumped up and bolted out of the room. "All right, now's my chance to call Professor Sterling back." To make sure Kian didn't overhear this time, she put on her earpiece. "Professor, to continue our conversation, though his behavior is similar to the last sensitive episode, he's very compliant this time. If I tell him to stop, he stops. If there was no intercourse, then this isn't a true volatile phase," Professor Sterling replied quickly. Alara agreed. If it was a real heat cycle, there's no way Kian could restrain his instincts. Right then, the front door swung open. She looked up, and as expected, it was Kian. "Please hold on, Professor," she said. His hair was a mess, flecked with a few wet leaves, and his clothes had smudges of dirt. He was carrying a basket overflowing with ether fruit. He strode over to her, picked out the ripest, sweetest red berry, and held it out, his deep eyes gazing at her with pure adoration. "For my favorite Ellie." The sweet, intoxicating aroma of the berry seemed to fill the air, making her feel lightheaded for a second. "I'm full from breakfast," she said, declining. "I'm not hungry." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but afraid of upsetting her again, he just said, "Okay." He sat down across from her, clutching the basket of fruit, and started nibbling on a berry, his eyes filled with joy as he watched her work. Alara could feel his innocent, intense gaze, but she tried her best to focus on the holoscreen in front of her. Right then, Professor Sterling's voice came through her earpiece. "Alara, check the ether fruit on Cygnus Prime. It could be an adverse reaction to the local flora." Alara looked up, her eyes meeting Kian's. For a moment, she got lost in his gaze, but she kept her composure. "Kian, on second thought, I think I'd like to try one of those." He immediately handed her the berry he'd picked out, his eyes sparkling with genuine affection. Ellie, I'm sharing the sweetest one with you. His stare felt like it could burn through her. Thanks, she said quickly, taking a bite. The berry was unbelievably sweet. Worried the issue might be with the fruit, she came up with an excuse. Kian, I want more. Can I have all the berries in your basket? His eyes widened, the half-eaten berry still in his mouth. He hesitated. Ellie, all of them? Yes, she said calmly. Don't you want to share with me? He quickly shook his head and pushed the entire basket toward her. Her gaze fell on the half-eaten berry in his hand. He followed her look and glanced down at it, his voice soft and pitiful. But this is my last half. She knew she was being a bit shameless, but she cleared her throat. You won't even give me your last half? He bit his lip. After just a moment's hesitation, he obediently handed over the last piece of fruit. With what she needed in hand, Ilara's expression returned to normal. Ignoring whether Kian was happy about it, she took the basket of berries to the kitchen. She activated the diagnostic device and began analyzing the berry she'd eaten. Less than 30 seconds later, the results appeared on the screen. The truth was clear. The ether fruit grown on Cygnus Prime had significantly lower energy content than the standard. She immediately sent the data to Professor Sterling, along with her conclusion. The commander's symptoms are due to an energy imbalance from consuming local ether fruit. This is an adverse reaction, not a volatile phase. That may well be, the professor replied. But Ilara, you need to be careful. The commander is in a volatile state and could become unstable at any moment. You need to keep him calm. Just as he said that, the kitchen door opened. Kian stood there, his eyes red, looking like he'd just suffered a great injustice. What's wrong? She asked, assuming he was upset because she took his fruit. He stayed quiet for a long while, but when she spoke up, he couldn't hold back any longer. He groaned. Ellie, it's been 5 minutes since we last hugged.